Welcome back to another episode of my autumn series where I'm showcasing seasonal produce. And this week we're touching on game, potatoes and Cavolo Nero cabbage. Now this recipe looks fancy, it is a bit of a treat and it does take a little while to cook, but I promise it's super easy. So if you've got guests coming around, if you want to put on a bit of a fancy dinner, or if it's the weekend and you feel like a treat, give this one a go. I've used a lot of classic French techniques to put this dish together, which you can use to mix it up with different meat and veg. But now let's get started by crushing 3 cloves of garlic. And if you didn't know, if you don't have a garlic crusher, you can also crush them with a knife using some salt to draw out the moisture. You just pressing down with the blade and chopping loads and loads until you get your paste. Then we're going to chop up 20 grams of parsley as finely as possible. Again, just chop and chop and chop. You could use a food processor if you want. I've just valued minimal washing up over kind of effort and time, but either way works fine. And then we do the same with some rosemary. Woody herbs work really well with game, so that's going to go really nicely. Cheeky tip, if you're chopping herbs, is to try and bunch them up as much as you can beforehand, even kind of rolling them up into a little bit of a cigar to try and chop as much as you can with each cut. Probably not my best explaining in the world, but there you go. Now we put a dry pan on medium heat and we're going to warm up our coriander seeds to get all those oils flowing and get the flavors out. And then crush and chop them to get a bit of a powder. Again, could do this in a pestle and mortar or in the food processor. I've just been lazy with washing up again. Now onto our meatball prep. So I'm using some wild venison mince. If you can't get your hands on this, then I would recommend pork or veggie mince as the best replacements, but I would really encourage you to try venison. I promise it's not too gamey, and all these extra spices and ingredients really complement the gaminess and tame it down a bit, so it's really flavorful. It's a really lean meat, so a healthier option, and in terms of sustainability in the UK, it is one of the better choices. Deers no longer have predators, so they are kind of taking over the woodlands, and they do impact biodiversity and release a lot of carbon. So managing wild deer populations is actually beneficial and important. Anyway, that was my very quick spiel on venison. It's really tasty. Please give it a go. So once the mince is seasoned, I always like to cook a little bit of it off in some oil in a pan to taste it and make sure it's not missing any salt or pepper. In this instance, it was missing some salt, so I added a little bit. And now that I'm fully happy with the flavor, I can start forming them into meatballs. I'm going for kind of 2-3 bitefuls worth, aiming to have about 3 on a plate. So this serves 4. So quick maths, I'm making 12 meatballs out of all this mince. Now I'm going to be braising these meatballs in a stock which will later become my jus. So as I mentioned, classic French cooking methods here. So I'm starting off by making a mirepoix, which is kind of the French equivalent to a sofrito if you've come across that in Italian cooking. So it's a base of carrots, onion and celery, but I've only got carrots and onions here, but that's absolutely fine. And the aim is to cut them into kind of even small cubes. And I've also prepped some more garlic, of course. Now this recipe calls for some red wine. I do think it's nice to get a good quality wine if you can, because you are eating it, so it does make a difference. And also you get to have a cheeky glass on the side. Santé! Now back to our cooking. Grab a marmite, also known as a Dutch oven, and put it on a medium heat with a bit of oil at the bottom. Once it gets hot, we're going to sear our meatballs, get them brown on all sides, and searing helps to form kind of a crust to maintain all those juices inside, but it also gives us some nice caramelization and Maillard reaction, which are all those lovely brown bits sticking to the bottom of the pan and on our meatballs, which are going to give lots of flavor to our jus at the end. Now once our meatballs are nicely browned on all sides, we can take them out and pop them to the side in a bowl. Then we're going to put a bit more oil in our pan and we're going to go in with all our veg. The water should start coming out of the vegetables, and that is going to start to deglaze all of those caramelized bits at the bottom of our pan. So that's what deglazing is. It's a liquid that's going to lift those brown bits off the bottom of the pan and they'll get melded into our sauce. So once those vegetables have sweated off nicely, we can go in with all our aromatics, a bit of salt, and then we are going to cover it up with our wine. Stir that all together and then we're going to put the meatballs back in the pan. Stir it up and then pop the meatballs back into the pan. Don't leave any juices, aka flavor, behind. And then since we're braising, we want the liquid to cover up to half of the meatballs. Then we're going to pop the lid on and leave that to cook for 20 minutes, then take it off and leave it to start reducing for 10. In the meantime, we can prep our mash. So I'm doing a sweet potato mash here. So I've got 4 sweet potatoes and I'm adding 1 potato to give it a bit more starch and substance. So just peel them, chop them into even sizes. The sweet potato should be a bit bigger than the potato because it cooks faster, and then pop it in some cold water, bring it up to the boil, then add some salt and reduce it down to a simmer until it's cooked. While that's cooking, I'm just going to prep my Cavolo Nero, a lovely seasonal veg. It's a type of kale, but I find it a lot milder, not as bitter, and it's got a lovely colour full of vitamins. You just need to remove the woody bits if it's got any, and then chop it down. Back to our potatoes. Once they're nice and soft, we can drain them and then start mashing. We're going to use a lot of elbow grease here. While they're hot, mash them up, add some cold cubes of salted butter. Salted butter will help to season it. You want it cold so that as you're mashing it, it emulsifies into the mashed potato. It gives it a lovely texture. Just taste it to make sure it doesn't need any more salt, and there we have it, banging mash. Next up, we're going to cook our Cavolo Nero in some boiling salted water. I find it takes about 7 to 8 minutes. And then in the meantime, we're going to take our meatballs out of our marmite and separate those veg from the liquid. The liquid is going back into the pan on a high heat to reduce it down. We're reducing that stock to a nice jus. And to finish off our jus, we're going to do what's called monter au beurre, which means to take it off the heat and then to whisk in some cold unsalted butter. It's going to emulsify and form this really luscious, shiny, beautiful sauce. And it's as simple as that. Looks impressive, tastes incredible, but pretty easy to put together. So now all that's left for our, I would say, quite bistro-like meal is to plate up. So I'm starting with a bed of sweet potato mash, then a few of our mirepoix vegetables on top because they're nice and I don't like to waste those and they just give you a bit of extra veg. And then I'm going to add 3 meatballs per person, a bit of our Cavolo Nero, that lovely green, and then just top it off with our jus on top. And there you have it, my venison meatballs with Cavolo Nero, sweet potato mash and a red wine jus. That's made me really hungry. I hope you enjoyed this one and you learned a few techniques that you can use in other dishes as well. As always, please make sure to like and subscribe for more. Bon appétit!